Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm very pleased to have guest Phil Escott, who was actually a vegan guru who I have much respect for because he, after trying to kill himself on a vegan diet, ended up finding carnivore and actually reversing his issues. He's an author of many, many books, including Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, and Red Pill Revolution, and many more that have absolutely nothing to do with carnivore, which is great. Phil, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah. Vegan guru.
Yeah.
No, I never really shouted about that too much. I did about the vegetarian and the Ayurvedic thing, but I think by the time I tried veganism, I was so ill already, and it made me even worse. I wasn't going to shout about it.
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, that's interesting. Transition into it anyway. Because you were saying that you actually wrote several books on plant-based nutrition in the 90s. So this was something that you were very much into when you were doing yoga and so forth. And just because being part of that culture, it was all about being plant-based. And so you got into that, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell us about that? How you basically came around to the light?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's sort of through the 80s and 90s, I got very involved in the whole Indian spiritual thing and meditation and whatever. And they do tend to preach that vegetarianism. You have this absolutely ridiculous thing that, you're not going to get enlightened, or you're not going to ascend if you eat any animal flesh. And it's such incredible nonsense. There's just like, there's probably 95 to 99% bullshit in anything that's put out there. And it's the same with the whole spiritual thing. There's some great gems in it, but most of it's rubbish. But I got caught up in that, and I started to study the whole Western interpretation of Ayurveda, which is, Ayurvedic medicine. And it's completely misinterpreted because, like we said on our last chat, it's, they say that the meat is like nectar. It's like amrit. It's the meat of freshly killed animals, the most nourishing thing for the body. Yeah. But I never read the proper texts back then. I just read, a few Westerners who misinterpreted it and sort of translated that into my own books. And, when you do that kind of thing, you notice certain little benefits, but all you're doing really is sort of balancing one plant toxin against another and sort of using things at different times of year. So, the results are very sketchy. And then after doing that, I got more into training and owned my own gym and ran it in the late 90s. And I got pretty big, nowhere near as big as you monster. But I got big, and I thought, I'm on the right track here. I know how to train. You get these people training real heavy and abbreviated and all that. Got a load of people big. But when they'd say, how do I get my abs out? I never really knew. It was always that calorie controlled nonsense, Yeah. And I never got really lean. I was never fat, but I never got really lean. I never got a good set of abs, even though I was writing for mountain bike mags and doing loads of cardio as well and all that nonsense. And then the first time I got a set of abs was lying on the sofa eating tons of fat and meat, completely crippled at 50 years old, 10 years ago. And there was a set of abs, and I thought, right, everything I thought was wrong. But before that, a couple of years before that, I'd had a load of niggles, for years I'd been living on non-steroidal anti-inflammatories and painkillers and all sorts, because I always had a really painful back. And then one foot started to really hurt, all the bones in the foot. And then I got iritis, and they said, have you got some awful arthritic condition? And I said, no, because I didn't know really then. I just thought I had a painful back, and I was always at chiropractors, so much that I'd learned almost all their moves. And in the gym, I used to be able to just adjust everybody because I'd learned it. And half my friends were chiropractors. I spent so long there. But then, it was 2010, just come back from Thailand, a holiday in Thailand. And one ankle just blew up. And I thought, I think this is an old injury that I had from falling off a climbing wall years ago and really wrecking that ankle. And I thought, I didn't think much of it. I thought it's a bit weird. But then the other ankle blew up, and then the knee came up like a balloon, and then my neck went. I couldn't move that, and it just went through all my body.
Yeah.
And eventually, they said, oh, it might be reactive arthritis and that'll disappear, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, surely isn't every arthritis reactive arthritis?
Yeah.
It's reacting to something, right? But they don't know. So anyway, it didn't disappear. And then I thought, well, I'll try their drugs. And I tried some steroids, and it's marvelous, isn't it, really? Because after 3 days, you're kind of normal. You think, oh, I'm cured. And it's a absolute false hope.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't take the methotrexate, but they did say you should try sulfasalazine. So I tried that, and it took me back to my sort of overdosing on psilocybin mushroom days in 1979. And I ended up having these horrendous psycho experiences. And I thought, I'm not having that. So I got rid of that as well. And then I just thought, well, I've got to fix myself. These people have no idea, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I started fasting, and that does help, obviously, because you're not eating anything and you get this lovely remission from it. And I thought, well, everything I've written in books, everything I've been taught is nonsense. So I've got to throw it all out. And I remember one day I found a website called Beyond Vegetarianism, and there were two guys running it, two vegetarians. And one of them had gone back to eating meat and one of them hadn't, even though he knew it was in our ancestral diet. And they pointed out that it was our ancestral diet. And we were never vegetarian. And that kind of got me thinking, because I was never a militant vegan or closed-minded or anything. And I thought, this is really interesting. So I started to look more into it and found Natasha Campbell-McBride and her GAPS diet. And that just blew me away. I thought, right, I've got to do this. Because at the time, I'd spent like a year to try experimenting with raw veganism, because I thought, okay, well, what's really got to cure me if I'm plant-based is to go more plant-based and then raw plant-based. And it was awful. I mean, all the muscle disappeared. And I ended up, I was something like 210 pounds, something like that, I think. And then I ended up at like 130 and lost an enormous amount of weight. And then when I finally went keto and started doing cold thermogenesis, I dropped another stone, as we call it, and I was about 120 pounds at 5'10", which is really emaciated.
Jesus.
Yeah. It was very weird. Huh?
I said, Jesus, that's extremely thin. Yeah.
I know, it was very weird to see, because I've been used to either being muscular or being a fat bastard. And so to me, it looked really weird. I was either one or the other, depending if I was training and exercising or not. And it was, it was kind of alarming. But I discovered Natasha Campbell-McBride, and I thought, right, I'm going to go for that. And I'd been doing loads and loads of fasting, and eventually I was just wasting away. I thought, I've got to eat something. And so I remember one day I thought, right, I've got this down. And I had some bone broth, and I roasted a chicken, and I got a load of butter, and I thought, I broke an 11-day water fast. And I'd been feeling amazing. I've been running around, everything had gone in that 11-day water fast. And I remember it was the spring, summer, and I put this rug down on the lawn, and I thought, I'm going to eat this outside. This is going to be the best meal ever, but I got to take it easy. But I was so hungry. I thought, that was so good. I'm going to have another load. I couldn't get up. It hit me that quickly. The joints inflamed, honestly, in a few minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Now I've got nothing to eat. It was probably the real low point. And now I realize it's when the gut's that leaky, chicken and butter, no good. It's very inflammatory. It's walking corn, as Jack Cruz called it, I think. And so eventually I figured it out, long story short. And even with some of the veg, but very few veg, I kind of turned it around, and I wrote that book on how I fixed it. I think it was 2014 or so. But then after going carnivore in 2015 and having been carnivore ever since, it's just amazing. It's everything's gone. The inflammation's gone, everything. Feeling much better without the last few veg, obviously. I never liked them, they're horrible things. And and on the days when I didn't cook them, I thought, I feel better anyway, so I just didn't bother. But it was a great journey. But it was, one thing was interesting, something that you said on one of your shows, that you I think it was on mine, maybe, that you just hardly train, or haven't been in the gym for 3 months or whatever. And I had an experience like that with this, where finally in the winter of 2013, 2014, I got enough inflammation out that I could go train again. And I just had like an Olympic bar and a trap bar and some Olympic plates in my garage. And all I did was like 20 rep deadlifts and, clean and presses and chins. And that was it. And I was training maybe sort of 8 minutes twice a week, that kind of Doug McGuff thing, you know. And honestly, I mean, I put on about 28 pounds in that winter. Now, a lot of that was muscle. I would think almost even maybe 20 pounds of it. And it sounds impossible, but I knew how to train really sort of brutally. And I had the memory of it, I guess. So I don't know if everybody can do that, but I haven't trained much since then. I just do a bit of body weight every now and again, but none of that muscle's gone on carnivore. You know, it just kind of maintains it. You know, it's nothing like the muscle I had before in the late 90s, but and you've inspired me, actually. I'm getting back into it. I'm going to start really going for it again, see what a real old codger can do. When I took over my gym, I was 35 and I thought, I'm an old man. And now I'm thinking, well, right now I am an old man. Let's see what we can do. But it was amazing that just it stayed absolutely. And I never had any problems with losing it. But since then, it's been an amazing journey. I started where I discovered you when you popped up on my Facebook group, the 100% Carnivore and Beyond Facebook group, sharing some amazing stuff. And I started that off for like 5 people from a paleo group who said, "Oh, you've gone carnivore. Do you fancy starting a group? Help us out with it." Yeah, sure. And it was amazing. I only started it for about 5 people, and it suddenly grew. I think there's about 15,000 now or something.
Yeah.
But the heat we've seen, and I'm sure you have too. I mean, the stories are amazing. All these useless anecdotes with nothing to back them up. But you know, and the clients that I consult with all over the world, and wonderful things I've seen. The most beautiful healing stories in all sorts of conditions, especially the arthritic ones that I understand very well, because I understand all the little tweaks and ins and outs of them. You know, that it's not just like, just go and eat some meat. Sometimes it can be a little more than that, but it's it's been an amazing journey really out of it. And I sort of thank every day that I can still play drums all the time, and I can run up and down stairs, and I can chase my kids around, you know, and there was a time when I thought I'd never be able to do that again.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, you know, when you were doing such profound arthritis, like obviously in the medical world, that usually just goes one direction. It only gets worse. And that's in spite of things like methotrexate and other biologicals then DMARDs and so forth that try to mitigate and can sometimes reverse that disease, but it takes a huge toll on your body. And generally it's going to get worse over time as well. And so being able to just absolutely reverse that is fantastic. I was going to go back.
Like I said, the rheumatologist wasn't interested when I went to see him. He was angry. You know?
Yeah.
It's very strange, that attitude, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. You know, it's just because, you know, you get trained to certain things, and well, this is what the evidence shows. And it's like, well, what evidence? You know, because you're seeing evidence in front of your face, and a lot of people are just, well, you know, where's the clinical trial? Where's the clinical trial? It's just like, well, you know, if you start seeing patterns emerging, you start seeing people getting better, you know, maybe think and say like, maybe I should do a clinical trial and see what's going on here. Maybe be a scientist and, you know, start collecting some data yourself, because it's obviously is helping a lot of people. And in fact, there are clinical trials and there are studies and so forth going back 150 years, tons of these things. We've just thrown them by the wayside because they contain meat. We're talking about meat-based diets and high fat, and everyone knows that fat and cholesterol cause heart disease. And so obviously you just have to throw those out. So actually the studies are there. The evidence is there in the medical literature, in the journals and so forth. But we've just ignored these things. You go back to the 50s. This is a very different, you know, body of scientific literature as compared to probably, you know, the 90s or the 2000s. Now it's starting to come back the other way because we have a lot of studies showing that, you know, cholesterol has nothing to do with heart disease except possibly being protective of it. And so now everything's being sort of reversed that way. But this is stuff we knew for quite some time in the scientific literature and in just you know, folklore and so forth. And so it's good that we're sort of rediscovering that, and that people like yourself can just do that through their own personal journey and then help other people. Did you come to like be a full carnivore just on your own progression, just trying different foods and see what worked for you? Or did you get influenced by anybody, or was it purely your own sort of journey?
No, well, I kind of did it quite early in this cycle of it. I mean, I think I found a website called Zero Carb Zen, and there was a few people doing it on there. It's a good little website. It's got some interesting info, articles on, you know, why people have problems with pork and the vitamin C myth and all of that kind of thing. Which sort of puts people off. They think, oh, I'm going to get scurvy. I've never seen anyone with scurvy yet, but so I found that, but there was none of this sort of, you know, big shout about it with Michaela and Sean and all of that kind of thing. So I just found that I didn't need it. I felt so much better without it, and I've never liked it. And you always get that tray, you know, it's just called the compost tray in our fridge, and you put stuff in there and then it rots, and then you put it in the bin, and then you replace it. And I'm just glad to see the back of that, you know. It's and I bring my kids up like that. You know, you met my little one on our last chat, and he keeps arguing that he's had broccoli once, but I don't remember. He's not had vegetables, you know, they're never in the house. I don't mind if they eat fruit. I generally put it in their lunchbox so that the dinner ladies don't report me to social services or something. So they have a bit of fruit, and they have a bit of and they have a load of meat. And they'll eat the meat, and then the fruit, it hardly ever gets eaten. It just comes back and it goes in the bin. So it's a waste of money anyway. But you know, and then they'll shout for some chocolate, and I don't mind that. If everything else they're eating is meat, they can have that now and again. I don't mind. But you know, they're not sick. But it didn't, there was nothing really that influenced me. But then I started to look into all the anthropology really, and it just made sense, because I think if you study, I keep saying to people, if you study sort of circadian biology, and you study sort of the cycles of nature really, and what nature would give you at a certain time of year in your latitude, and then you and then you study anthropology, what we've actually eaten from the bone isotope records and whatever, look at indigenous tribes and what they eat. And then I think that the whole rabbit hole of deuterium, I was going to say to you, you know, I won't go on about it this time, but you've got to get my good friend from the Red Pill guys, Graeme Norbury, on sometime and go down that rabbit hole, because he's utterly brilliant on that. He's got one of those science boffin heads that I don't have, you know, and he can explain it all. But it's really interesting how it ties it in. But if you look at those, then and the plant toxins, of course, and then it's a no-brainer, isn't it? You can see what's happened with this horrible misinformation. I just find it so sad that, you know, the mainstream has pushed this 5 a day. The vegans are pushing all this complete nonsense. And it just goes, it filters down to other people. It's what I love is when somebody comes to me who's been eating McDonald's and fries and stuff, and they say, right, I've got psoriatic arthritis or something. And I say, well, you can eat steak all day. And they go, great. But when you get a vegan come to you and I'm really crippled, and you think, I've got 3 months of deprogramming here before they're even going to consider it, you know, that's sad, but it holds up a lot of people's healing.
I've found that, if people will engage and actually have a serious conversation, even if they are really on the other side of it, and, you know, well, what about this? And what about this? And they, you know, they're trying, you know, they think that they have a lot of solid information on the vegan side of things. I find that if they will actually engage, even if it's aggressively, I can get them. And I have 100% kill rate so far for vegans and vegetarians, that in just personal sort of one-on-one sort of debate and discussion. And
the vegan whisperer.
Exactly. And I had one, I think I mentioned this. She was finishing her PhD in nutrition, and we just went point for point, study for study, over actually a course of, you know, days and so forth. We were texting and talking and so forth. And it finally got to the point where she just was sort of stunned silence and just said to me, my entire education was a lie. You know, it's a lie. Like, I know it's a lie. You've proven it to me. You show me the studies, you show me the evidence. Like, this was all a lie. I don't even know if I can work as a nutritionist, because it's a lie. Because as a nutritionist, you have to pitch the textbook, and the textbook is pitching low fat, plant-based diet, high in carbs, high in sugar. And she was like, I know that that's wrong. And I know that this is causing people harm now. Like, I don't even know if I can work as a nutritionist now. She doesn't. She actually became like a health coach, like a life coach sort of thing. And, you know, used her credentials to, you know, give her some credence. But, you know, I've found that people can be receptive, because so many people are, you know, like you got into it for a very specific reason. You thought it was the right thing to do. You're around a lot of people that were influencing you. And a lot of people do that as well. They go vegan or vegetarian for, you know, a good reason to them. You know, they think about it. No one just changes their entire life like that and goes in such a restrictive way of eating just because, they've thought about this. They've worked on it. It's like maybe for their health, maybe for the environment, maybe for animal rights and so forth, all of which can be actually shown to be beneficial on a carnivore diet as opposed to a vegan diet, paradoxically, it seems in some of these cases. But because they've generally come from an honest place. If you have an honest discussion and show them the evidence, they can come around. It's the people that, see, or maybe have made a name for themselves in that community. And now basically, if they go back on it, they're going to lose their income. And so they're the ones that are really just die hard on this, and they just won't listen to sense. Maybe they know full well, but they're still going to pitch it in a way. And a lot of these people do get caught. They get caught, these vegan influencers and so forth with hundreds of thousands of followers, just talking about vegan this and vegan that, how healthy and wonderful it is. They get caught eating, sandwiches and hamburgers and things like that, because they're just, they're wasting away. And so, hopefully, the more voices like yours and so forth that get out there, just more people will see this, because a lot of people have a vested interest in their own lives and health. And a lot of people think, I speak to doctors all the time who are generally overweight, and they say like, oh, well, people are just, fat sick because they just don't listen to the advice. They just eat too much fat and do all this. I'm like, no, that's the problem, is they did listen, and the advice was bad. And so now that we're getting more better advice out there, people are really benefiting from this, and it's really good to see. You have gone through quite a lot of other health issues as well, and with your clients, and even with yourself and with your mother, have even addressed and benefited recovery from things like cancer. Is that right?
Yes, that was a great story with my mom.
Yeah.
Basically, I was looking after her for ages. Just one sec. Little Peter's kicking his football around. He's making a proper racket. He's kicking. Their school's been shut because of the storms, and so he's kicking a football around in the living room.
Yeah.
Yes, my mum. She was when she was in her 90s. She said to me one day, "Oh, I've got this lump in my breast." I'd been looking after her. She had a stroke in 96 or so, when she was on statins, of course.
Right.
And since then, I just threw all the meds in the bin. I didn't even know what I was doing back then, but I just had an intuition. I thought, these are no good. And she was in a wheelchair. She couldn't walk. She was on that hideous osteoporosis med that they would take once a week. I forget what it was called. And it just made her feel so sick. She'd have to stay in bed for a week. And then the dentist started to discover that this was rotting the bones in the in people's jaws. And so it was doing exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And she was on Vioxx, and she was on all kinds of awful things, steroids, everything. She had what's it called? Some kind of COPD. I'll think about it. I'll think what it was in a minute. But she just got so much better, and in her 90s, she was picking my kids up, running them around with them and whatever. And then she said, I've got this lump in my breast. I said, all right, let's check it out. And it was really big, it was a good sort of 6 centimeters across, really, really tough.
Jesus. Yeah.
And the skin was starting to go,
Right.
And so I thought, well, okay, we'd already got rid of the plants about a year before. But she'd probably had it for about 8 years or something, I should think, just never told me, never mentioned it, probably never even noticed it. So many people don't notice their cancer for so long, and then they notice it, and then the chemo finishes them off pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
But she had this lump. And so with the gastroenterologist story that I put up at some point, I think I told you or whatever, where he agreed with me that she should be on this sort of GAPS type diet and high fat and whatever. And that stopped all the reflux and issues like that. And so I just sat her down, and when she got diagnosed with this, and I sat her down and showed her the truth about cancer, or the first program of it. Now, I think that guy's a bit off base, because he's always going on about plant-based stuff, and he does have some people who's had reversals on there and whatever, and people do it tends to come back later when you do that, but do it that way around. But at least it showed her that people had done it in some other way, and she said, let's go for it. Yeah. So I said, okay, let's do it. And we got her completely carnivore. except for the occasional bit of Greek yogurt and berries. And she went completely carnivore pretty much. And then I tried the proper Rick Simpson oil on her, you know. And so I went and bought it, and I realized it's just so absurd that you can get 7 years for that, because it's sort of processed. They class it as a class A drug. Absolutely insane. So I was buying her this stuff, you know, and just giving her little bits and whatever, but she was getting really mashed. And she had this little flat nearby. We used to live in the same big house, but it just became too much for a while looking after her and whatever. So got her this little flat close by, this little apartment. And I went around there, you know, and one day she was sweeping the lawn. And I thought, what are you doing? And she went, I don't know. And I thought, I can't leave her alone, really stoned all day at like 19. She was so stoned. But it was actually reducing. But I thought, I can't do that. So I thought we'll try something else. We took her off that. And then it sort of stabilized a bit, but it wasn't really going away. And we tried everything, all the Essiac tea and all the reishi mushrooms and all that kind of thing, really throwing everything at it. Nothing really worked. And then one day I had this intuition, and I just thought, so many times I've heard about people with fibrocystic breast syndrome, just painting breasts with iodine and taking iodine, going on an iodine protocol. And this reverses it. There was a friend of mine who wrote for my blog. You know, she wrote an article on this. Great musician, actually, and she wrote under a pseudonym for my blog, because she said that when she went to a hospital with all these lumps, none of them were cancerous, but said it was like a bag of marbles. She had more lumps than anybody had ever seen in there, and she just kept painting it with iodine, and they all went away. She didn't take any medication, and she didn't even do an iodine protocol, drinking it, I don't think. But I just thought, well, hang on, if this has worked for that, and it's working for these hormonal things for women, and, you know, there's so many thyroid conditions around that seem to be really fixed by this, you know, replenishing the iodine, let's give it a go. So I put her on an iodine protocol, and it was for about 3 months. And I'd read that it often didn't work while you were on it, but when you tailed off it, often 2 or 3 months after that, the tumor just disappeared. And I thought, well, okay, maybe it's worth a go. And, you know, her oncologist, who kept trying to get her to take drugs and she wouldn't, and was getting very frustrated with her and me, because obviously he thought I was a complete lunatic. And so he was saying, you know, well, we probably have to operate at some point, you know. And then I actually gave up. After that iodine protocol, I'd kind of given up. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just take her down and say, you know, can you do this under a local if it ulcerates? Because she's not going to take a general anesthetic now. And he said, yeah, sure, we can do that. But I'd rather you took these pills, you know, these sort of ones that dissolve these hormonal tumors, because she had one little one on the lung or something, little one on the liver. And then that can be a gauge as to whether the other ones are disappearing as we get it to disappear with the drugs. And so I said, no, we're not going down that route, because she did try them for about a week. And there was loads of forums of real pain in ovaries and womb and whatever. And people sort of having very weakness in their legs. And so I thought, well, all right, I'm open to anything. Try it for a week. He said, no, it's totally safe and everything. Indian doctor. And I researched and I said, you know, this stuff's been banned in India. When I took it, no, I didn't know that. I said, yeah, because of all these issues that you're claiming don't happen. I found forums full of women saying tremendous pain here, you know, pelvic area, loss of function of the legs. And so what happened? She was on it for a week, and then I went around there and she'd fallen over in the bathroom, broken her wrist really badly, you know. I'm like, no, right, that's it. That's enough of this stuff. You know, she'd already said that she was starting to get pains down in the pelvic area. And so it was like a week. And so I left her, I got her off those things. And then I thought, okay, well, I've given up. At least we can get this out on a local. And then I just forgot about it for a while. I just said to her, look, I wasn't looking at it. I wasn't painting it with iodine, nothing. We'd finished all that. and I said, okay, well, let's just tell me if it ulcerates through the skin, if it gets painful or whatever, and then we'll see if we can get this taken off. And this went on for a long time. I thought, well, what's happening? And then one day she said it's going away. And I said, no, I can't believe you. You know, let's have a look. And honestly, I mean, you can see the pics on that little video I've got where it's reversing, you know. And some vegans have come to me and said, you reversed the pictures, because that could never work. But yeah, it was horrible, and sort of like purple and coming through the skin. And then it all went back to, the skin went back to normal, and the tumor started shrinking, and she was fine. Now, unfortunately, about 2 years after that, she got 2 bouts of pneumonia, and the second one took her. But the breast cancer never did, and it was shrinking all the time. And whether it would have gone or not, I'm not that concerned. I mean, maybe it leaves some lump somewhere or something. The lumps are not the problem, right? The process is the problem, you know? So, but anyway, well, as you can see, all the skin came back to normal and whatever, and the lump reduced a lot. And I'd like to have seen the culmination of that, but we didn't get a chance. Yeah, it was lovely. And as I said, it's one of the most satisfying moments of my life when that oncologist turned around and said, how on earth did you do that? It was lovely. It totally disarmed. He was actually a lovely guy. He wasn't one of those arrogant guys. He really did think that I was mad, but he was kind of cool with it. And do you know what? This is what I find with docs. The nearer they get to like emergency room docs or surgeons, the more open they are. If their livelihood doesn't depend on the drug peddling, you know, and he was more of a surgical oncologist. And so he would sort of chat with me, and he'd humor me, and he'd laugh. We'd have a laugh about it, you know, and he's going, you're nuts, it's never going to work. And I just go, yeah, okay. You know, he never got angry. So to his credit, but he was completely disarmed when he saw that. And I just love to see it. I love to see it again and again, these docs waking up and just, you know, to add to the amazing knowledge that you've got from medical school, and then filter out what is great knowledge and what is rubbish, is so important these days, I think.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing, is you have to be open-minded. You know, I was told in my first few months of medical school that, you know, the information and understanding of medicine and how everything works is so fast-paced that by the time we graduated medical school, everything we learned was going to be out of date. And so you just had to keep track of things. You had to stay on top of things. And so you had to have an open mind as well. And so, and, you know, I noticed this too, you know, of doctors, depending on where they are in their training. Medical students will just listen to anything a senior says as like something coming out of the Bible, because they just don't know anything. And they're just like, oh, okay, this is someone else. They're going to know everything. Interns and sort of first, second year doctors, same way. They're just trying to soak up information. Then you start getting, you know, a few years after that, and people start solidifying because they're doing exams or doing boards or doing all these sorts of things. And basically, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It matters if it's in the book, because they're taking an exam. And so everything that's out of the book, that's gospel. And so if it goes against that, a lot of people are just like, no, this is what it says in the book. I'm not listening to that. Not actually that many people, because you can actually put forward a pretty convincing argument. You know, if you have experience with that, which I have. I've only met a few people that were just, you know, not really receptive to that. Most people are. But then you get the people that are past that, and they're, you know, they've gotten to a stage in their career that they've seen things being turned on their heads, and they were doing things for 20 years and they found out, oh, no, that's killing people. Don't do that. And they've had to reverse that. And so they understand that, you know, things change all the time. And as long as someone is providing, you know, good evidence, you know, you should listen to it. But, you know, you always say, like, okay, where's your evidence? How do you back that up? Whatever. And if you do, they go, oh, okay, fair enough. I've always been dealing with a lot of surgeons doing that. So that could be why I've gotten a lot more receptive people. And as I think I mentioned, you know, last time we spoke, you know, the gastroenterologists really got their knickers in a twist when I was telling their patients about, you know, they were asking me, is there anything I can do to avoid surgery for Crohn's? And I was like, well, yeah, there are these studies that actually show that if you alter your diet and go on an elemental diet, you can, it has a better efficacy than steroids, and it keeps people in remission and so forth. And, you know, I mentioned Dr. J.H. Salisbury, who was curing people with this since the 1800s with a pure red meat and water diet, and all the way up until 1975. There was a book called The Stone Age Diet. Again, a gastroenterologist basically arguing, my profession doesn't need to exist if you don't eat plants. And, you know, and then we completely forgot about that, because in 1977, the USDA said, cholesterol causes heart disease, end of story. All meat's bad, all fat's bad. Just get rid of it. And all this massive body of knowledge just got thrown out the window. And so I would mention these to people because I don't think it's ethical to just say, nope, surgery is your only option, when clearly it isn't. And I never would I would never want to pressure anyone into trying anything. I just say, look, here's some information. Here's some things you may not have known about. And here's some resources. You look it up, you do your own research. And if it works, great. Surgery is always on the table. Surgery can always happen. You're not in a rush. You don't have a perforated bowel. This can wait. And they got absolutely pissed. And, the surgeons, haven't. So maybe that is a good way of thinking about it. People that are dependent on the prescription. And that's the way you think. You have this problem, here's this pill to fix it. And that's really how we're taught in medical school, and like, there's a problem, this is the solution.
It's a shame because, when you get diagnosed with something, and I've been in that position, and you go in somewhere and they just say, you're going to have this for the rest of your life and you have to take these medications. And it's awful. They go out of there, I did. It's just like you're crushed.
Yeah.
I mean, I went out of there going, I will find a way out of this, but right now it looks desperate. Most people will just go, I'm going to do exactly what the doc says. Give me more pills, because they're terrified. I was no less terrified, really, because I thought, my God, that's it. That's all my mobility gone. Everything I like doing involves a lot of activity, and I'm not going to be able to do that again. But so now I think the really important thing is when I do a consult with somebody, you get right into it and you take all their case history, find out everything from, have they got amalgam fillings? Have they had childhood injections? What have they had? What have they been eating? What stresses have they had through their childhood? All of these things mount up, and you can get a picture, and the docs can't do that. You've got like 5 to 15 minutes or whatever with them, and they don't know how to take it anyway. I just had to, my partner, my missus here, has Graves' disease, and she's controlling that with carnivore and iodine and all sorts. But her endocrinologist, I had to write him this long letter because he said, I want to bring your partner in because you won't have your thyroid cut out. And I said that, you got the wrong one here to sit down and try and convince that she should have her thyroid taken out or irradiated with, radioactive iodine and put her at risk of throat cancer in future and dependent on thyroxine and whatever. So I wrote him this letter, and I had to say, listen, I'm not coming into the hospital because I'm going to have to wear a muzzle. I've never worn one, not for 1 second. I'm not going to wear one. But I will write you this letter. And I wrote him this thing, and it was a long one. I like to waffle. But the gist of it really was that I think, it was malpractice, really, that you haven't asked her anything about her diet, anything about her lifestyle, and you haven't even figured out that she grew up in Arusha with massive amounts of fluoride in the water, which is, a horrendous halide that will stick in the thyroid and cause horrible damage. I mean, she had so much fluoride when she was young because of the water supply, and so many people who grow up in Arusha and Tanzania do. They get fluorosis. She's got like little brown marks on her teeth. Her teeth are great. There's not a filling there, but and she's coming up 50 or whatever, but she's got fluorosis. And so you'd see that and you'd go, now that is a real marker. Plus 20 years vegetarian, before she turned round. Plus that, it really is a marker and something you need to know if there's a thyroid condition, but he didn't even ask. And I'm like, listen, man, there are these, you're saying never, ever, ever take iodine. Never take iodine if you've got Graves. I mean, it even frightened me. And I've seen through the cholesterol thing, through all the crap that's out there, because they were saying you're going to have a thyroid storm and it could kill you within a day or whatever. And going, okay. It took us a long time, and we have this great friend called Kano Pine, who has an iodine group, and he's on the on our 100% Carnivore Facebook group with some great info, and also Dr. Jeremy Ayres, who I work with in the Red Pill Guys and the Human Unleashed, and they just, they had to really give us the proper evidence. Now this is not going to kill you, and in the old Merck manuals, that iodine is a cure for thyroid storm. So why is it going to cause it? So anyway, we eventually got the bottle to do it, and actually, 10 times or more the doses that my mum was taking really piled it in. And within a week, all the thyroid levels were perfect.
Oh, wow.
It's like, come on, man, she didn't die. And now she's been on the iodine, real excessive iodine protocol, for a couple of years now. Absolutely fine. Or let's see, 2019. Yeah, still absolutely fine. And so there's all this it's the fear mongering that gets me. If somebody comes to me, they go, or rather, if they go to the doc and you say, right, you've got 6 months to live, and they're often dead in 6 weeks or something, because the fear gets them if the chemo doesn't.
Yeah.
But with me, it's like somebody comes to me and goes, and they're obviously really depressed first time, and they'll say, right, I'm really, I've got my joints, they don't work. Oh my God, it's so painful. And I'll just be smiling there and going, honestly, you have no idea what a blessing this is. I say, it's hard now, but you're going to come through this, and you're not only going to get better, but you're going to be better than you were before, because you're going to have all this amazing knowledge for your family and stuff like that. Oh, I'm so excited for your journey. You're fucked up, but it's going to be okay, because this is the way out. Imagine if the doc said that, had the difference in the mood when people would walk out, after those 15 minutes. But after like hour and a half with me, you can see them really smiling at the end. They've got hope finally, because the docs had never given them hope. Yeah. Because they're only told that those meds will do it. And I think that's one of the worst things, is this unbelievable fear mongering. Because we do mess up. We do get in terrible agony. It's not going to be fun for a while, but you are going to get through it. And that's what I love, and seeing each consult, they're smiling more and more, It's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think it comes from a basic lack of understanding of the causative nature of these illnesses. We don't always look at that in medicine, because we don't necessarily know what the cause is. We thought that cholesterol caused heart disease. That was crap. And, and these other things as well, we just don't really know. We're getting a lot more information now. And it's showing to be, things like, lectins and how they, bind, and different sorts of chaos they cause in your body and so forth. And many, many, many other things that are, from plants and plant-based nutrition and so forth, and how this affects your body, causing leaky gut, letting these bacteria and other, poisons from the plants that normally pass through your body. Now they get into your system and cause havoc. They don't understand that there's a disease process going on underneath all of this. They just think, well, here's the problem. This is the best thing we have to mitigate that problem, as opposed to thinking, okay, what the hell is causing this? Does this just happen? Is it purely genetic, like Huntington's disease? It's just like, that's it. You have this gene, you're going to get this thing. Well, we know that's not true, because we have people, even genetically linked issues. They have, what's called penetrance. You have someone who has the gene, and only 60% of people that have the gene get the genetic disorders. Okay. So, there is something else going on. There's an environmental trigger. You have there's certain things that are purely genetic, right? Few, but like Huntington's, you get Huntington's, the gene for Huntington's, like you're going to get Huntington's by and large. And then you have purely environmental, where like someone chops off your arm when you're 30. There's nothing in your genes that was going to, cause you to do that, except maybe, being a dick or something like that. And like everything else is in between. You have a genetic predisposition and environmental trigger. But if you have the gene, but you don't get the trigger, you don't get the disease. You have to have both. And if you have the trigger, but you don't have the gene, you don't get the disease. So most of these things are genetic trigger or genetic underlying disorder and environmental trigger. And people aren't thinking like that. They're not thinking about, okay, what could be causing this? You don't know what the gene is? Fine. We haven't figured that one out yet. But what about the environment? What's going on with this person that's causing that? That's something that you can do, but we don't get taught like that. We don't train like that. And so we think, well, here's this issue, whatever the hell is causing it, this is the pill that goes with it. Where, if you look a bit under the surface, like you have, like I have, like Dr. Baker has, and many, many others, Dr. Berry and so forth, you start seeing that, the underpinning of all these diseases are basically just eating the wrong thing, doing these things to yourself to harm yourself: alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, plants, spinach, kale, horrible stuff. And this is causing the disease. And you remove that, you remove these causative factors, then you remove the problem, and your body just gets back to business. And until we as doctors start thinking like that again, we're going to keep going down the same path. If you want to keep getting the same results, keep doing the same thing. And unfortunately, that's what we're doing. That's what we've been doing for half a century. And so it's very important to just keep pushing that idea that, we need to just change the entire outlook in medicine and how we approach these sorts of things. And once you get all this environmental, all these environmental influences out of the way, then you get back to just things going wrong. You have genetic disorders, you have accidents, you have, birth and, childbirth and delivery and so forth. You have infectious disease, and you have poisonings. That's really it. That was medicine for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, those 5 broad topics. Now it's all chronic disease. It's all chronic disease. That's the vast majority of what we do in medicine, is treating chronic diseases. But, I think that still in those 5 categories, but the poisoning, we're getting poisoned, and that's, precipitating these diseases, but they're not diseases. This is a manifestation of poison in your body, as evidenced by the fact that you remove the poison and the condition goes away. There's a cause and effect relationship. And so we've just blown up the poisoning side of things because we don't realize that we're being poisoned. Like, I've said before, like the Romans, back in ancient Rome, they all had lead pipes and they got low-grade lead poisoning. And people just think, oh, that's just how you age. Your hair is supposed to bleed. It's like, no, it isn't. That's not supposed to happen. And people figured it out. It's like, okay, what the hell's going on here? And they figured it out. But for a while there, people were screwed, and they were just growing up generationally being screwed. And then people just grew up going like, oh yeah, that's normal. But it's not normal. Look, 2 generations back, that was not normal. That did not happen. And yet now people dismiss it and say, oh, it was probably happening at the same rate. We just didn't notice it. It's like, yeah, because everyone born before 1986 was an idiot. The guy Da Vinci, like he couldn't, sort his ass from a tea kettle, like, these people were brilliant people. Just because they didn't have a knife. I actually got into it with this guy. He's a doctor. And he just approached me on Instagram seemingly nicely, saying, oh, you had this post about, about kids and things like that. And there's actually an article written by a group of pediatricians that basically said vegan parents should have their kids taken away because they are harming their children. And this was their opinion. This wasn't mine. And I just wrote an article just discussing childhood development and so forth. And just giving the facts and citing, studies and so forth. And so he just seemingly nicely and seemingly honestly, came and was talking to me about this sort of stuff. And, said, well, if, first of all, like, if I thought I was harming my kids, I would have them eat meat, without question, not a problem. Like I value my kids more than I value animals. And so that's fine. But, but they're thriving, they're doing great and all these sorts of things. And I was just like, great. I'm really happy for that. I genuinely am. But are they developing to their genetic potential? I mean, how do you know that? I mean, they're doing fine. That's an N1 trial. Like you looking at that, it's doing fine. Well, compared to what? As any economist will tell you, compared to what? Compared to other kids, fine. You're a doctor. Your wife is a doctor as well. You got good genes. Your kids are going to get good genes. You can understand how much the supplements and all the deficiencies and all these sorts of things. Great. So your kid's going to be doing better than another vegan kid, and you've got good genetic stock anyway. What does that mean? It means nothing. What's that kid going to do compared to itself? And he quickly turned to being, just have this facade of geniality, but was very passive aggressive, very sort of backhanded comments. And I just had enough with this guy, and I just sort of went for his throat. But like it
makes them very aggressive, doesn't it? I mean, the most aggressive people I've seen are vegans. The things that I've had said to me, I just have to laugh, really. I mean, it used to really amuse me when Sean Baker on his videos, he used to always say, now there's a prize for the best death threat, for vegan death threat in the comments.
Nice.
you know,
Yeah.
and they just go crazy at him.
Oh, that's
Because I think they
funny.
knew that finally Sean was on there, and he looked great, and you know, and he was a doc as well. And, you know, he could probably do absolutely 100 reps with Gregor with one arm overhead, you know. And it was like, you know, obviously he's onto something, but they wouldn't see it. And then they got onto me at one point, and what about Sean's blood results? You remember when this came out? I think it was on what was his name? The paleo dude, I've forgotten. Anyway, his podcast, and Rob Wolf. And it was like, yeah, and they went through his blood results and all that, and he had low testosterone, and he had some sort of raised blood sugar or insulin or something. And he'd probably just been training or something, and they don't understand the blood results from somebody who's carnivore. They're never really quite the same as other people's. And I had to make some video in the end. Just stop asking me about Sean Baker's blood results, because it went on and on. And I went and got my bloods done because the vegans were saying, you're probably dying of diabetes or heart disease like Sean Baker.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so I thought, well, all right, I'll do it. But I thought I do have a bit of a worry. I thought, because I've got, for 30 years, I was teetotal. And every time I had blood tests done, they'd say, are you an alcoholic? You know, well, in the later years. Because they said, you know, your liver results are way off. And I had fatty liver, and I had cysts on the liver. And when I started to go keto, and when I also introduced liver flushing, which is the only bit of one of the 1,000 woo-woo things that I did when I was vegan, that I still think has some value. And I don't even know if it works as they say it does, but it does do some interesting things. But I did a bunch of those, and you know, the keto thing, and then I went back for a scan on the liver, well, an ultrasound, and I said, have I still got fatty liver? And they went, no, it's absolutely perfect. And I said, oh, that's good. How about the cysts? And they said, oh, you haven't got any cysts. Oh, brilliant, they've gone. And said, well, no, you can't get rid of cysts. You can't have had them. And I said, no, really, I did. Go and look at my medical result, my medical record. So over to the computer, blah blah. Wow, you did. And this girl, she was turning me over and over trying to look for these cysts, you know, and couldn't find them. It was like, how did you do that? And I said, well, I told her, you know, and the liver flushing process, but also the keto. So, isn't that dangerous? She said. And I said, what, dangerous? And you want me to take methotrexate, and this is dangerous? I said, like, no, it's not dangerous. But so anyway, I cleaned out my liver. And, you know, I would just take a sort of sip of alcohol and get really itchy, and hated it. And you know, all those 30 years or whatever, I just couldn't really deal with it at all. So I just didn't drink. And then, you know, into the carnivore years, when everything had fixed itself, I thought, oh, I'll try some wine and some brandy and stuff. And I was like a teenager again. And I thought, right, I'll go, you know, it's got to go soon. I thought it's tailed off, but I had a good experiment on it. I thought, let's experiment with alcohol. And I found, as a carnivore, I didn't get a hangover. Now, please, here's a disclaimer here. I am not recommending alcohol, right? I just decided it's my own choice, and I thought I'm gonna have a go with it. But I wouldn't get a hangover, nothing. I'd be absolutely bounce out of bed in the morning, no problem whatsoever. And then, but because the vegans had asked me for this, I thought, well, I'm guessing my blood results are going to be fine. LDL is going to be up where it should be. Yeah. I should think, you know, everything else is going to be okay. The triglycerides, HDL will be balanced. But I thought, yeah, I'll tell the truth, you know, about what's going on if the liver results come up dodgy, because they were dodgy all my life. And now I've been drinking, which I never did before. And so I went to get these tests done. And she said, you know, the nurse was reading out the tests, and she said, oh, well, your LDL's up a bit here. And I went, well, that's cool. That's where I want it, because I'm on a real high fat carnivore diet. And she said, oh, excellent. She said, yeah, that's fine. You know, all this is just a con to sell statins. And I went, oh, nice. Excellent. Nice. You figured it out. And I thought, that's wonderful. And so then I said, well, she said, everything else is perfect. Everything's fine. And I said, yeah, well, what about the liver results? And I'm kind of bracing myself, and she just looked at them and went, perfect. And I thought, whoa, okay, I've got away with it. Now I'm, again, you know, it does other things. It rips thiamine out. It rips the B-vits out. It's not a good idea. you know, but I was experimented with it for a while because it was fun, because I missed out on it in my youth. But that was kind of interesting, you know, that I was plant-based and my liver was ruined and they were asking if I was an alcoholic. And then I was drinking and really experimenting with it, and my liver was perfect because of the carnivore diet, because it cleaned it out. And, you know, I'm an idiot, you know, I take all the wrong turns in the book, but I like to do these sort of crazy biohacks. I've done enough with plants now, that's enough. But you know, just anything that I can experiment with to prove that the theories are completely the opposite of what people think, it's great by me. But, you know, you're right as well. You mentioned about the genetic thing, you know, and of course the rheumatologists said to me, well, yeah, you've got this arthritis because you've got this HLA-B27 thing going on, you know, and that's what happens. And okay, all right. So, you know, 5 minutes Googling and you can agree with them. And you go, yeah, you get that. But then a little bit more digging, and it's like 70% of people with this HLA-B27 never get any sort of arthritis. And so, no, they're definitely working on the wrong thing there. So these, you know, they seem like gods when you go in there, but they're really piecing together some really daft information. And I always liken it to a Rubik's Cube, you know, where you get like 2 or 3 sides right, and then you can kind of look at it from a certain angle and it looks like it holds up, but you turn it around and it's all over the place.
A mess. Yeah.
And then they seem to sort of turn it around, start peeling the stickers off, and, you know, they don't do the Rubik's Cube properly. The studies just get so perverted to peel the stickers off and get the colors in the right place. And it's incredible to see through it now. I mean, when somebody now says to me, you know, in a thread or something, you know, some conversation, well, I'm a dietitian, I go, oh dear, you know, no, that's terrible. But again, I did find, you said that, you know, with your friend there, or chatting to this dietitian, and I remember finding a forum full of dietitians who were saying, look, we've discovered this, how are we going to go on? You know, what do we do? We don't have a job anymore. And this wasn't even carnivore, this was, they discovered keto and stuff, and the fats weren't bad. And that was enough for them. It was just like, whoa, how do you do that? And how do we go on? And, you know, there's a dietitian in one of our local hospitals who is quite renowned, who, somebody said she needs one of those reversing warnings like you get on a lorry, you know. She can barely get, she can barely get through a door. And then I found this wonderful article in the Dietitian's World or something, which is called Dietitians and Their Weight Struggles, and how you should still always listen to a dietitian if they're overweight because there's more factors. And you're like, come on.
All right.
It's obviously something's going wrong with all the info that they've been fed, and yet they still come up. I mean, the two just second in aggression behind vegans is dietitians when they come on. You tell, well, I am a qualified nutritionist or dietitian. You go, oh, here we go. You know, and fruits and vegetables are essential, and you get one of these threads, and eventually it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But yeah, the standard education, to me, it's the real sad thing is the fear mongering and the horrible states I see people come to me too. You know, I used to do these kind of ancestral diet and ancestral lifestyle chats at a local pub, which has a big upstairs room, and I do some talks every now and again. A place where I know the landlord very well, play a lot of gigs, and I said, can I get this room? And we'll do regular sort of ancestral meetups, get guests in, get docs in, get whatever. And I was doing one day, and a friend of mine had said, I'm going to bring along a friend of mine, and she's been under the same rheumatologist as you. And this must have been about 2017 or something. And I'd left this guy's, you know, practice in sort of 2011. He was the guy who got really angry and started frothing at the corner of his mouth when I wouldn't take the methotrexate. And so I thought, well, okay, this will be interesting because she's been under this guy since about then. And she came in and she was obviously in terrible pain. It's like 6 years down the line. And I said to her, you know, how are you getting on with this guy? Oh, well, you know, how's your arthritis? Oh, it's still there. It's terrible. And she said, I'm on these meds, and she tipped out 17 meds onto the table that she got from all sorts of different departments, because then she'd gone for the antidepressants because she was so depressed about it. She had trouble with the liver, she had diabetes, and there was something, I forget all the things that she had developed since she'd seen this guy. I mean, you know, I've got to chalk it up to him. This guy really gave her a tremendous array of ailments. It was beautiful. He must be very proud with how he developed her illnesses, you know, and managed them perfectly into a flourishing set of comorbidities. But it was shocking to me, you know, and she's still a good friend, and she's got a son, and I've been on his podcast, and he's really up on this. And so, you know, hopefully we'll manage to turn this round properly. But she was a little bit addicted to her carbs, you know, so it was difficult. But it was horrifying to see what had happened, the difference in staying with that guy for 6 years and being away from that guy for 6 years. And I was jumping around doing this and that. And then we had some ancestral movement guy in there, and I'm sort of sitting around cross-legged on the floor and bending and stretching. I have one knee that's a bit dodgy from the time it was inflamed, and it's nothing like, I won't be doing my 3 hours a day in full lotus position ever again, I don't think, or arse to the floor squats, I don't think. I don't know, maybe if I just stop being lazy with it and really work it, I might do it. But there is some thickening of the synovium there that's causing a bit of an issue. You know, there's no inflammation, but it's just kind of damaged. But to see me doing that, she's going, how do you do that? How do you even get on the floor? How do you do, you know, it was a distant memory for her. And it's, I don't know, I just think the terrible states that people get into with this polypharmacy. If somebody comes to us, to, you know, Dr. Jeremy, we sort of confer a lot on cases and whatever, and see these people that come to Kim or come to me or both of us. And you must get him on the show, by the way. Utterly brilliant dude. 30 years he's spent, you know, doing these things and fixing people outside the medical system. Comes from a sort of osteopathic and chiropractic, naturopathic background, but then into carnivory and everything. But Jeremy Ayres, wonderful, so eloquent, marvelous character, beautiful, beautiful healing record he's got with people going back a long way. But, you know, we see these people with these real polypharmacy, and it's so much more difficult to fix them. If you get somebody who comes along and goes, oh, I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis last week, my knee blew up last month or something, it's like, this will be easy, you'll be fine. You know, but when you get somebody saying, well, I've got a lot of joint damage and I'm on all these meds and they've kind of harmed my liver and I've been on them 20 years, but I've heard about this carnivory thing. You're like, yeah, I can't promise you're going to have the body that you had 20 years ago now, you know, and the meds have done a lot of damage too. So we've got a lot more to reverse than the condition. You got to reverse all the stuff that these chemicals have caused. And it's very sad. It's very sad. They stay on them all this time. And you see these Facebook arthritis Facebook groups. I started my own one, if anybody's listening. It's a real mouthful. It's called Rheumatoid and Psoriatic Arthritis, Mitochondrial Health and Carnivory. I was thinking, how can I get it all into one title? But it's great. I got only about 1,500 people on there, I think, but it's nice to take it out of the carnivore group and have them in there. But I had to start it up because I got thrown out of every arthritis Facebook group there is, because for having the temerity to suggest you can heal this naturally. I even got thrown out of the natural healing ones because, you know, you go to them and you see, the first thing you see is their cover photo, and it's all full of berries and plants and all these wonderful multicolored eating the rainbow and all that. And you start to mention underneath, and then you get all this thing, well, everyone's different, don't be so dogmatic. And I'm going, no, I'm not being dogmatic. Eat what you like when you've healed, but just look at the plant toxins, look at what this is doing, look at what happens to the gut, you know, look at what happens when the gut heals. Look at the work of Zofia, you know, Dr. Zofia Clements at Paleo Medicina in Hungary. Look at how they're healing the guts and testing it with these gut permeability tests that, you know, and you can see as the gut heals, the autoimmunity dies down, whatever it is, and plants will cause a leaky gut. You can see, no, they don't. You need fiber. How do you even shit? Have you, what, you think I've been 7 years, you know, on a carnivore diet and never been for a shit? I was saying on Sean's podcast, you know, that my turds could be on the front cover of the glamour calendar for the Bristol stool chart. They're perfect. You know, I want to wake the missus up in the morning and go, look at this crowd pleaser. Look at it, man. You know, it's and after sort of years of dumping like on Dr. Greger's daily dozen bowel movements diet, you know. I mean, no, it's just something Tristan Haggard said, my friend on Primal Edge Health, you know, he's brilliant, a carnivore and whatever. And he does the most amazing Greger impersonations. You got to check out his channel sometime and just, he's so funny. But he, because he's got his daily dozen, Gregor, you got to eat these daily dozen toxins, but Tristan just calls it his daily dozen bowel movements, because that's what happens, but after that, how the digestion comes online again. But they're always like that, and you get thrown out of these arthritis groups for even suggesting that an all meat diet would, and I think it's such a shame, because, I made one of my YouTube videos on my channel is, why can't arthritis Facebook groups stop you healing?
Yeah.
Because, it's just, they've got a little bit of knowledge that maybe the meds aren't so good. But then you get them in the sort of awful support groups for the people on the meds. And they're all on these biologics, and all they're doing is posting pictures of incredibly swollen fingers, like sausages and whatever. And they're going in, and I'm on Remicade, and I'm on this, and I'm on that, I think, well, if it's not working and it's costing you a fortune, why? But they've got no hope, because these people say there is no hope.
Yeah, well, and they also say, I was like, well, imagine how bad it would be if you didn't take all this crap. And of course, if they're doing whatever is precipitating their disease, probably will get a lot worse too. But is that, I know sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. These people, especially what you were talking about, 17 medications. That is something that you literally in first year medical school, it's like, don't go down this rabbit hole. Like, don't just go prescribing medications for the side effects of medications and medications and medications. Like, you need to go back to the beginning and go like, this is the wrong medication. Let's try to find something else, or a different dose at least.
Well, isn't the problem there that you've got too many departments in hospitals, and one doesn't know what the other one's doing? So, you get, the liver's a problem now because of the methotrexate, right? You go to the liver dude, and then you go to this, and then you go to that, and they don't know what they've all prescribed. And so it just gets mashed up. I mean, when are we going to have a human body department in a hospital, because it all works. It's all connected, and it all works together.
Yeah. And it's, well, it usually falls on the GPs. You get this poor bastard GP with, this patient with just this laundry list of meds, and they're supposed to rationalize their medication list. But, it's very hard for them to do, because, they're not specialists, and they don't know exactly how important, X, Y, or Z is. And so it's difficult for them to, take people off of these sorts of things. And then you get, too many cooks in the kitchen, and you've got different people prescribing and stopping and starting different things. And you got this poor person in the middle just getting ping ponged around. And it's very difficult. And that is something that you have to be very, very careful of in medicine, and always try to keep people on the minimum amount of doses. There are things that certain medications help with tremendously. And I'm not ever going to say that there isn't. It's just that, certain things that we treat are better treated through lifestyle and diet in the specific ways that, we've been talking about, than the medication, which is just a Band-Aid to, just to deal with the symptoms as opposed to addressing the actual condition. I just want to say, go back to like the blood, you're talking about how you posted your bloods and so forth. This is something I've been seeing just a couple of times recently in the comments of some of my videos. Some people were saying, not a lot, but there was every now and then someone was just like, some of the vegan people just saying, oh, this is bullshit. Like, they're like totally sick. They look healthy, but they're dying on the inside. He won't even show his bloods and talk about his blood results. How do you know? And I'm like, commenting back, I'm like, who the hell ever said I wouldn't show my blood results? I talk about my blood results all the time. I was like, I have no problem talking about my blood results. I don't care what my bloods are, because I live physiologically. I live, ancestrally, and I eat a biologically species specific and appropriate diet. So I know that my body's going to be working as well as it can genetically. So I'm fine. But I have a friend of mine who's an endocrinologist here in Perth. And I've worked with him in his clinic, and he does functional medicine, bariatric medicine. Has been doing this for 40 years and had very, very, very good results. And doing things in doing fasting, intermittent fasting, and ketogenic and non-ketogenic sort of things 40 years before all of this stuff, and having very good results. And I talked to him about carnivorism and so forth. He was very, very interested, and we got into the details of it, and he became more interested. And so he said, well, look, you look healthy, you look good, you're muscular and lean and so forth. Well, let's check the bloods. Let's check under the hood to see what's going on. And so he ordered this battery of tests, just testing absolutely everything. and gave me a call a couple weeks later and just said, hey, we should talk about this carnivore diet over steak sometime, because your bloods came back and they were very good, and we should go through them. And so, I went in and we talked about them, and pages and pages of these things. And, he looks at things in a very different way. We look at generally how you have a reference range for a blood test is the first 2,000 people that come in that year. That's your spread. And who gets blood tests? Sick people generally. And so, and old people, young people, all these sorts of things. And so you're getting a wide range of healthy and unhealthy people, elderly and young. And so that's not necessarily an accurate reference range for health, for optimal health. And so he goes by reference ranges looking at people that are 25 and healthy. And this is the range that you see in those in that cohort. And so that's sort of what he bases his metrics on. So we're looking at that. And he said that going through all my bloods, that if he took 100,000 people my age off the street, that my bloods would be number one without a shadow of a doubt. And I was like, yeah, I figured, and like said that, the only thing he said was that, your LDL is, a little bit high. And I'm like, I'm happy with that. That's good. It's physiological. And, I had to explain that to him too. And he was just like, yeah, so that's fine. And, my testosterone was just fine. It was, in the range, in the optimal range for a 25-year-old, so, and I'm 40. So it's like, this isn't something that I've seen, certainly. And, you talk about the different carnivores and different sort of people. Well, Paul Saladino was talking about how his testosterone dropped after about a year and a half on carnivore. And then he reintroduced some fruit and honey carbohydrates. And after a while, these things corrected. I just haven't seen that. I haven't seen that in myself. I haven't seen that in my patients. I've seen the exact opposite. I've seen people's estrogen levels and testosterone levels normalize. I've seen them get better. I've seen their growth hormone levels improve. I've seen their, they say it's like, Saladino was also talking about, like, after, because he just came out with a post about why you should eat carbohydrates, basically, and fruit sugars and so forth. I just watched it. And, he was talking about, different sort of biochemical processes in your kidneys and so forth, that when you don't have carbohydrates, that you end up wasting away more electrolytes. This is why carnivores have electrolyte problems. Like, I don't have electrolyte problems. The Inuits don't have electrolyte problems. Everybody in the ice ages and so forth, at least were able to sustain a generational society that they got through 20,000 years of ice ages without any honey, without any fruit. So obviously you don't have to have carbs. And I would argue that carbs actually are a detriment, especially fructose. And so he's talking about, magnesium and so forth, and you're losing this stuff and you get low levels. Well, my magnesium level and zinc levels and calcium and so forth, they were all perfect. And that's actually something that Dr. Rensburg was saying, that in Australia, the soil is actually quite poor in magnesium and zinc. And so the plants aren't getting enough zinc and magnesium out of the soil. So the animals that eat those plants aren't getting as much as they would either. So almost everyone in Australia is zinc and magnesium deficient. I was not. And so, and I was eating carnivore, and I have been eating carnivore far longer than Dr. Saladino has. And so I think that there must be something else going on in his particular case. And then, if he's seeing this with his patients, and so you didn't mention it in the talk that I saw, but, if he is, there might be something else going on. It might be to do with the recommendations that he's giving. I know he's very into organ meat, and, he has a line of liver supplements and so forth. I don't know. There is something to be said for that. And you get hypervitaminosis A, and this can, suppress TSH, and you can suppress your thyroid. This is something that he and other people have been saying. Oh, you go carnivore for a while, your thyroid tanks. These are all people that are pushing organ meats. These are all people that are really pushing liver, especially. And, when you think about the proportion of an animal that is liver compared to skeletal muscle, it's hundreds of pounds of skeletal muscle to every 1 pound of liver. And so you're simply not going to be, eating liver in the amounts that we have it accessible to us today in the wild. You're going to have 1% of your meat maybe is going to be liver, probably a lot less. And so, yes, it's rich in vitamins, but that therein lies the problem. The classic one is a polar bear liver that has, so much vitamin A, it will kill you. Well, these other things, aren't going to kill you just by eating one liver, but you keep eating, a lot of liver, half a pound of liver a day, every day, things are going to build up in ways that you don't necessarily want. And I think that's part of it. And there's other things going to be involved as well, but I haven't seen that. I certainly haven't seen that in myself.
Well, you make such a good point there, which is exactly the one that Sean made in response to Paul Saladino's thing. Well, how big is the liver compared to an animal? There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it has its place. And when somebody comes with a very leaky gut, I really like the paleomedicina thing where they say, try and get 400 grams in a week while you're healing, just because most people who come in are that depleted.
Yeah.
But I don't think past a certain point, you really need to go and pile that stuff in. No. And it is interesting that it does seem to be causing problems when people have it too high in the diet. And thyroid, that's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the time these blood results are just a snapshot, right? I mean, they can change day to day, and particularly when somebody's healing and we don't know what the body's doing. I think one of the classic examples of this is people, with Hashimoto's, and so many women have Hashimoto's at the moment, particularly women. And so many particularly have been vegan and vegetarian or on low calorie diets and all that kind of thing. And you get this panic that, because I think it was started by, I've forgotten her name now, but she's called the Paleo Mum. And she put this thing out, that if you go keto, then your thyroid tanks. And it started off this real fear about it. And what I've seen anyway in people is that quite often when they go keto, when they've got Hashimoto's or something, the thyroid levels go a bit crazy afterwards. and if they've got a doc who's taking the bloods, they go, oh, you better get back on some carbs. That almost killed you. And then they start posting, oh, it almost killed my thyroid, going keto, never do that. And then you go, a couple of people I've had where it's the same things happen, but they haven't gone back. I say, well, how do you feel? I feel fine. So I say, well, just give it a bit more. And usually after 2-3 months, those levels balance out again, and so the body's doing something that we don't understand and the endocrinologists don't understand. And it's just a little snapshot. It might have been totally different the next day. And just because of that, and somebody put out some fear mongering about our ancestral diet, don't eat what we're supposed to eat as a species because your thyroid will tank, like all of those Inuit and Maasai, whose thyroids tank. So I think they can be a bit misleading. I also had another guy who came to me and he said, look, since I've been going carnivore, I got this, the whole creatinine's gone up and my doc's really worried and he thinks my kidney function's going down. I think I'm going to die and all of that sort of thing. I mean, he'd be phoning me up literally a few times a day going, I'm really worried about this. And then finally his doc did some research and said that, these levels can change when you go onto a carnivore diet and it's okay. It's all right. There's nothing wrong with his kidneys. I was like, he's going, oh, thank God for that. Do you know my doc's discovered this? I said, well, I told you that ages ago. It's not a problem. There's no mechanism by which a fatty ruminant meat diet can blow your kidneys up. There is no way. There's a couple of ridiculous rat studies or something that show it. But I mean, you also make this point of the nutrients and how they get through. That great study with the oysters, where they split people, three groups of people. They wanted to find out how the zinc levels shot up or increased in the body when you eat oysters. And so they gave one group of people just oysters, another group oysters and black beans, and another group oysters and tortillas. And they all had the same amount of oysters. And the ones who ate the oysters on their own, the zinc levels went up nicely. Oysters and black beans didn't go up so much. Oysters and tortillas, no real raise in the zinc levels. Yeah. And so it's like, it's this old thing when vegetarians go, oh, just add a bit of chicken, for a bit of nutrients. And it doesn't work if you've got it with all your rice and pulses and stuff like that. It's not going to do a damn thing.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say.
No, that was it really. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to say, that's a big thing. Like, there's a ton of different kinds of lectins, and there are some lectins it's a class of molecule. There are some lectins in meat, they don't seem to cause a problem, but these lectins in plants, use it as defensive sort of mechanisms, they cause huge problems. One of the problems are that they bind different nutrients. And so when you eat this in combination with something that actually has some nutrition, which plants, generally have a lot less. And that was the whole argument in the 80s. I'm sure you remember, they said, oh, you want to lose fat, eat plants, eat celery because it has less calories than, there's less calories in that you'll get out of the celery than it'll take to digest it. So you'll actually lose calories. So if you eat celery, you'll actually be burning calories. It's nonsense. And so, that's one of the things though, is that these lectins and other properties in plants, they actually bind to nutrients that you need, and they make them unavailable. And then it gets worse, of course, when you have like gluten and so forth will split these gap junctions in your cells and cause leaky gut. And then all these lectins can get in your bloodstream, and then it starts binding to things they have no business binding to in your body, and letting in bacteria and so forth. And that's another thing too. We're talking about nutrients. The nutrition facts that are on the box generally mean nothing if it's a plant-based food item, because they're just looking at for protein, they look at actually total nitrogen, which is not true. Crude nitrogen is not necessarily protein. Okay, so this is just nitrogen. It's not necessarily in the form of protein, but they consider it that. And so usually only a smaller percentage of that is actual protein. But then it's like, what are the proteins? Because a lot of proteins in plants cannot be absorbed. They cannot be broken down. 80% of the protein in wheat is gluten, and that is inaccessible to your body. You cannot use that as a protein nutrient source. All it does is screw up your gut and cause leaky gut. And so you're like, oh, look, I'm eating wheat. Look at all this protein I'm getting. No, you're not. You're not getting any of that crap. And so, it causes huge problems. These nutrients are not bioavailable. You're just saying, oh, it has this iron, it has this, it has that. Your body's not absorbing that. So that doesn't count. You really can only, when you're looking at meat, all that stuff is bioavailable unless you eat it with a salad or with, something like that, or pasta or rice or whatever, because you're eating these lectins and other sorts of factors that bind the nutrients and so forth that you want. It screws that up. But if you're eating meat on its own, your body gets that. After your gut's healed and so forth, you're going to get predominant amount of nutrients and so forth from that. You just don't from plants. These things cause serious harm in your body as a poison, and also with lack of nutrients and binding actual real nutrients and so forth. So people don't realize just how multifactorial bad these guys are. You got your mic.
Got some raging. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a while to kick in this Yeti mic. I see we've got the same sort of phallic Yeti mic, although mine is multicultural.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. When you have autoimmunity, there's an old saying about bipolar people, isn't it? They're like everybody else, only more so. Yeah. And it's the same with autoimmunity. You can feel what goes on. Like I found that when I was really sick, very flared up, if I had like 2 mouthfuls or just a couple of fries, I would feel it in the pain the next day. But if I ate half a bar of chocolate, I was fine. And people get focused on the sugars, which are not good. But I think when you're autoimmune, the anything fibrous is way worse. Yeah. I mean, I'd eat a bit of broccoli and I would be in much more pain than if I ate, some ice cream or something. Yeah. Like the dairy's not that good, but dark chocolate or whatever, even though it's got oxalates in it, which I would definitely avoid these days, having had the kidney stones from my juice. I used to do these smoothies, these healthy smoothies in the morning. And what they used to consist of was a couple of avocados, 2 packets of spinach, almonds that I'd soaked overnight so that they'd sort of liquidize, and then a whole bunch of maybe coconut milk and a load of honey, Yeah. And to be honest, because of that stuff, it covered up the taste of the spinach and whatever, or the enormous amounts of kale and spinach, and it would actually taste pretty good, like a bit of a milkshake. But my God, it was oxalate soup. And that's what caused the kidney stones. A total overload. I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're autoimmune, you can feel something very, very quickly. Maybe not if you have a thyroid condition or MS or something like that. It might not react so quickly. It's kind of slower. But when you've got arthritis, it's excellent. It's the best autoimmune condition to have, to realize how bad foods are and how, because you eat something like a bit of broccoli and you'll feel it, and yet you eat some chocolate and you won't, and it's definitely down to that. Some people say it's feeding the Klebsiella lower down in the gut. So, chocolate's kind of gone high up in the gut. It absorbs those simple sugars. But then when you get the fibrous stuff further down into the gut, carried down there, then it feeds these Klebsiella, which are kind of associated with things like ankylosing spondylosis and whatever, and iritis and all those kinds of things that go with it, which is a horrific. Having had that 5 times, that is one of the times when modern medicine is great. You want to get those steroid drops in, right? Don't go and have a steak if you have iritis. If you're at that stage when that's triggering off, that can blind you. Go and do that. But so you can feel those fibrous things hugely, and then when the gut's healed, that you can have that. I once in a blue moon, I'll have some potatoes now. It's the only vegetable that I like a couple of Christmases ago, I think I've been totally carnivore for about 5 years or something. I thought, what? I remember how nice roast potatoes were. So I'm going to have a ton of them just with a load of butter, like 50-50 with butter. It's so nice. It's the only vegetable that actually tastes nice is potatoes. And so, and still you've got to have a load of butter with them to make them taste really good. And there was no reaction at all, nothing whatsoever. And I thought, that's ace. One mouthful of that, like 10 years ago, would have put me on the couch for ages. But so that is that's really, I see it in my clients as well. They go, oh well, broccoli's healthy though, isn't it? I can have that as long as I cut out chocolate. And I go, cut out both. But if you're going to have one, have a bit of chocolate, because it will hurt a lot less. We just don't realize how horrific these things are.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I guess it's hard for people because people still think that just vegetables are good for you. It's very hard to undo that because we've been told and brainwashed by our parents generally, since we were born, the vegetables are good for you, eat your vegetables. And they end up, becoming a broken horse where they've broken down, like, okay, they fought against it. I hate broccoli. I hate vegetables. And then finally they were just broken, like, okay, just tell me what to do. And they're just this docile creature. And it's hard to undo that. But, it is one of those things because I think too, because, in the keto range of people, obviously you do eat vegetables and can eat vegetables. And so that's one of the things that people, because they think vegetables are so good for me, they go keto, and then they're like, well, I have to get my nutrition from vegetables. They're not realizing the meat is actually the nutrition. And they think that's a trick, some trick of nature. You're tricking your body into thinking it's starving to death and somehow dying is helpful. It's not. Generally, as a rule of thumb, dying is makes you dead. And so, these people end up going keto with they'll start eating massive salads, taking lots of vegetables and so forth. And I think they harm themselves. I think a lot of people, when they get like a keto flu, they could be detoxing from certain things and withdrawing from sugar. I certainly see that. Coffee as well. And then the tons and tons and tons and tons of vegetables and so forth, like you're saying, like oxalate soup. And these people just feel like crap for a while. And I don't really see any reason why they wouldn't. I would feel like crap. And, when I get my patients and friends and so forth to go on carnivore, and they just go pure carnivore, no artificial sweeteners, so forth. Those things they're nasty. I don't see them get a keto flu or something, which doesn't make sense. You've done fasting and so forth. Did you get the flu 2 days into fasting ever? No. And so, yeah, exactly. And so, the biochemical switch from running on, blood sugar and having, hyperinsulinemia to going back to a normal metabolic state where your body can mobilize and utilize your fat stores. Why would that make you sick? Why would that give you raise your interferon and so forth and make you feel fluish? That doesn't make sense. And it doesn't happen because people that skip meals or fast or whatever, every practicing Christian or practicing Muslim every year for Lent and Ramadan would have the flu for a month, but they don't. They actually feel better. And everyone, you have tons of studies showing that people feel better, look better, are better, reverse disease and so forth going on, fasting and so forth. And they, mimic that by putting them on a fasting mimicking diet, which is just a ketogenic diet. And so you don't see that. And I think that, part of that is going to be withdrawals. But I think a large part of that is that these people are just piling in the vegetables because they think that's where I got to get my nutrition. As long as it doesn't have a carb, it's good for me. People are so myopic. We look at one thing. This is the end. This is the cause of everything. So before it was fat and cholesterol, like that's it. As long as it doesn't have cholesterol, it's fine for you. It had Entenmann's, you might remember those, like coffee cake, fat-free coffee cake, just crusted in sugar. I remember I was a kid, my mom looked at me like, fat-free, these are fat-free. She got 2 of them. And I was looking at that just like appalled. I was like, okay, that may not have fat in it, but there is no way that's good for you. And we had all this.
There's a great one, isn't it? That humans are the only people, they're the only animals intelligent enough to make their own food, yet stupid enough to eat it.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's funny.
Hang on. I mean, the whole keto thing is weird because I mean there are some times where people seem to get an electrolyte thing going on, and if they get cramps or whatever, it's easily fixed in the early stages. It doesn't seem to work when you put it on the food. Like I had when I just gone keto, the one thing I did get was real arrhythmias. I mean, it was really bad. There was one point, it was my heart kept on and on and on skipping. And there was one point where I was walking around a local town with my missus, and she's a nurse, and it's the first time she got worried about me. I was ridiculously skinny, I was like 120 pounds or whatever, and my heart was just going, and it was missing every third beat. And I thought, I think I'm going to die here. And so I actually went to hospital, and they said, yeah, we think you might be having a heart attack or whatever. And so they stayed me. They sort of got me in an ambulance, blue lighted me to another hospital, spraying this stuff under my tongue, whatever. And I got there and they said, no, it's not. It's just some electrical thing. And then they check your potassium, and that's all they check. And then they don't tell you anything. And so I had scans on it, 24-hour monitors, whatever. And they said, yeah, you do have this arrhythmia thing. But it seems to be one that's sort of associated with athletes. They kind of have it when they're getting fitter and things. We're not that worried. And I said, well, okay, tell me whether I can go on holiday or something. I was going to go on holiday. Am I going to die on a plane or something? And I waited a couple of days, and the head cardiologist phoned me up, and I thought, right, I'm in trouble. And in the meantime, I discovered, taking some magnesium, and it seemed to calm it down a lot. But then he phoned me up, and I thought, God, this is going to go wrong, And he said, well, I looked at the scans. He said, you used to have these calcifications, and yet your arteries are now clean. And when I went keto, it just seemed to clean up the arteries. I was in a mess, late 40s, like 12 years ago. So I was in a mess. I was a great big fat dude, and sort of, well, I never got really fat. I didn't even do that properly, but I was fat. I was fat for me. And all sorts of metabolic things going on. But then I think it just took a while to balance out. But so it stopped skipping so much, but it was still skipping occasionally in the day, particularly when I was sitting there cooking or in front of the computer. And so there is definitely an electromagnetic thing going on there. But I'd figured out the magnesium, but I hadn't figured out the salt. And it was my son, who was a climber, and at the time he was doing a lot of climbing on climbing walls and whatever. And he was cramping up. And he said, I remember him coming in this door here and going, have you not figured it? He said, you've got to take it in water. It works totally differently. He said, I just take some salt. I bung it in some water. If I cramp up when I'm climbing, it's gone. 5-10 minutes later, it's gone. I can carry on climbing. Okay. But I put loads on my food. And he said, no, you put it in your water and try it. Never had a problem since. Don't need to do it anymore. But I did it for about a month. And it just, every time it skipped, I'd take quite a lot of salt in water, and it was fine. And funny, I've seen this again in a group. If somebody does do it, and that happens in the adaptation phase, I just didn't know about it. So I let it go on wrong. And I think I had a horrendous electrolyte imbalance by the time, but also, you know, I was pretty fucked from my year of raw veganism or whatever before that. So who knows what was going on in there. But I remember one guy came to me and he said, well, I'm all right. You know, he came for a consult and we chatted about a bunch of things, but the only thing was that his legs were cramping up at night. And I thought, well, to be honest, he's doing everything right. And the only thing is just add some salt in water. And I thought, I feel a bit guilty charging him for that. You know, just, you know, we've just had a nice chat for an hour or so. And yet all I've told him to take some salt in water. And then I got this call and he said, that was so miraculous. I've sent you double the money. I'm like, you're joking. Okay, the guy was pretty well off, so I didn't feel bad about it. You know, he had a big business in the local town here. But it was just that, fixed his cramping up in bed, you know, and if it does happen, that little tweaks like that can be very useful. But to most people, it doesn't happen at all. You know, they're fine. And certainly this keto flu thing, I think you're right. You know, the body's dumping some other stuff. And also, as you burn fat, obviously, you know, there's a load of toxins that the body stores in fat, right? And they start circulating again. So, you know, that's why it's often, I think, that when people go keto, they get these oxalate dumps and kidney stones or whatever. There was some Facebook post, wasn't there, where somebody was asking about that, where it was your post or mine about our last chat, and saying that everything's blamed on oxalates, and it is. I mean, we get all these crazes, don't we? Oh, it's all blamed on you know, carbs, and then it's all blamed on oxalates, and then it's all blamed on deuterium. For a while, Jack Kruse started on with this deuterium thing. And so everything that went wrong with everybody was blamed on deuterium. I mean, yeah, it's a combination of all of these things, but we have that mindset, don't we, of the one problem and the one thing to fix it that we get brainwashed with, and it carries on into the stuff, into the natural healing. And that's why I love looking at people's issues. And diet is the most spectacular. It is amazing when you do change the diet. The honestly, the symptoms, you know, it's just beautiful to see them go. And then there's things to sort of mop up, those little polishing techniques. And you get people like a guy yesterday, you know, and he has all sorts of neuropathy, and he has psoriatic arthritis and other things. Guy I was talking to, a lovely dude. And he's just, you can see his mood coming up. And then suddenly I found out, right, he's a trader. And he's in front of the screen, you know, and he's still getting this neuropathy, and he's still getting sort of agitated and really wound up. And his stress is not coming from how much he hates his work. It's because of how much he loves it and how it's too exciting, you know, and so it's chronic stress still. But he's also got that blue light all day. And I just said, well, just put Iris on the computer, get Iris Tech on there. It takes out the blue light, you know, and it stops the flicker as well, which can be very damaging neurologically, you know. And he immediately went, my God, it just feels like a totally different experience looking at my screen. You know, I look at somebody's normal TV. I mean, we even have an orange screen over our TV here because the kids won't wear the blue blockers. And it's funny, isn't it? As somebody who advises people on stuff like this, it's very difficult to make any money because you can't do all the supplements and stuff. I mean, finally, I thought, somebody came to me and said, oh, you've got a big reach in the carnivore world. Will you sell these dried supplements, you know, like Sean, sorry, Sean, sorry about that, like Saladino does. And I remember Sean actually on Twitter saying, why don't you just go back to selling supplements and dog food? Did you see that one? Oh, it was funny. And I put this picture up underneath of these two really fat women just fighting with gloves on. I don't think Saladino found it very amusing, but Sean did. But, you know, and so you can't do anything. So somebody came to me, you know, with all these products of mixed desiccated organ meats and liver and blah, blah, blah. I thought, yeah, finally, for people who can't face the liver, if they want to do that, maybe it's something I can sell, you know, that'll be okay. And he sent me some supplements, and do you know what? They just felt wrong in the body. I don't know what it was. And then I had a chat with online with Chaba Tot at Paleomedicina and Zofia, and I said, look, they all say that there's no nutrient damage in this and they're all fine. It's just like the real thing. Is that right? And they went, nah, come on, you know, no, it damages stuff. I mean, it's processed food, isn't it? Is it anything that's processed that we're mucking about with? So I thought, well, I can't even sell them. So like, what can I do? Well, I can sell is blue blockers. You know, that's now the only thing that a carnivore sort of health coach can sell, apart from the knowledge. And that's great. That's fine by me because it takes that simplicity, like my autoimmunity course, the subtraction course, just telling people how to get off that pin and not take the aspirin for the pain, you know. It's so miraculous it's taking the stuff away. But yeah, I agree with you about the processed stuff. I think those desiccated organ meat supplements, I think they're a bit of a waste of time as well. If you're not brave enough to eat a bit of liver, maybe your body's telling you don't need it, or maybe just man up and do it and whatever, but just no pills, can't be asked with them.
Yeah, that's my big thing with supplements is, if you need to take supplements to get basic nutrition, then by definition your diet is deficient, and a carnivore diet isn't. And I go a lot by taste as well. Like you say, if you're rejecting liver, maybe your body doesn't want it. Raw liver tastes very different from cooked liver as well. I found it actually tastes good. I actually like raw liver. That's something Adele Davis, who was one of the early nutritionists in the early 1900s. She wrote several books on nutrition. She actually was way ahead of her time. And one of the big things that she came back to regularly was raw liver, and seemed to help quite a lot of people. And she actually was already subtracting things out, like, okay, well, people are having problems with certain things. Well, what are you eating a lot of? Well, let's take that away. Let's take that away. Let's take that away. Let's see what happens. And then see how you're doing. We'll add it back in. And then people actually had big reactions to it, because as we see in carnivore community, and I'm sure in certain ketogenic people that have eliminated something from their body for a long time, they don't have the same tolerances that they had. And then when they reintroduce this after several weeks or months, they can feel a bigger effect. And part of that is the contrast. You're feeling healthy now for the first time in your life. And now this is making you feel less healthy. And you can see that. Whereas before you had so much stuff going on in your system, you just always felt like crap, but you called that normal. And now you actually feel normal. You actually feel great. And now that's bringing you down. So you can see that, but also because you don't have as many, defenses and so forth, and tolerance is built up for these sorts of things. So it could ostensibly hit you harder. And so she found this as well, that you reintroduce these things and people get slammed with them and go, okay, avoid that thing, whatever that was, just stay the hell away from it. I found that if you slice up liver and like salt it and put it on dry, I don't know, some people see my videos, but I take my steaks, I'll wet age them, and then I'll cut them up into steaks, and I'll salt the outside, and I'll put it on drying racks where they're not touching. You can't have them touch, or they'll have moisture and bacteria growth. But it's something that Alton Brown, who's a celebrity chef, talked about, and that my mom picked up. She loves cooking, and I just started picking up. And that's the only way I eat meat is like I'll salt it and leave it for at least a day, if not several days, and it'll dry out more. It will brown so much better. It'll cook so much better. It tastes so much better. And I did that with liver. And after just a day or two, it tasted better than any piece of liver I'd ever had in my entire life. And then after several days, it started turning more dry and started getting like this gummy texture to it. It was like gummy meat. And like, that sounds disgusting even to me, but like I loved gummy candies. Those were my favorite candies growing up. And all of a sudden I'm eating like gummied meat, and I just loved it. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so that taste was a good response for me. But, after a little while, it was nice to sort of do that. But eventually I was just kind of like, yeah, that's enough. I didn't really want any more. And that was it.
My
and
son did that. My 6-year-old, who you met, and he used to you could give him a whole plate of liver and he'd ask for more.
Yeah.
And he loads. And now it's like, no, nothing.
Yeah.
He's had enough. His body's just had enough of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how taste goes. When I'm eating a steak, when I'm hungry, when I haven't eaten, it's the best damn thing I've ever had in my life, because my body wants those nutrients. So I'm getting that positive feedback. And as I keep going, it just tastes slightly less good. And I eventually get to the point where it's like, I'm really not enjoying this anymore. That's why I generally tell patients how to gauge how much to eat, especially if they have had, very differing portions. Some people not eating enough, some people eating more than they should. And so that to readjust their portions, they need to learn how to listen to their body. And one of the main things is listening to the taste. And I've certainly noticed that with liver. And, since then I haven't really felt the need to get any more liver. I bought it once. And people keep asking, oh, you have to do organ meat, you have to do this. No, not really. You don't. You can if you want to, but you don't need it. And I can count on the fingers of one hand the amount of times that I've eaten liver in the last 20 years that I've been doing carnivore off and on. And I can count on the fingers of two hands how many times I've ever had liver in my entire life. hands down. I don't take any supplements. I don't take, any pills or certainly don't take any hormone supplements and so forth. All that was fine. And I don't even need to take vitamins and magnesium and zinc, even though I'm in a zinc and magnesium deplete country. Everything's just fine. And I don't eat liver either. And I've been doing this a lot longer than people like, Dr. Saladino has. So I don't know why he's seeing the issues that he is. Generally, when I see patients struggling with carnivore, early on you could have some electrolyte sort of imbalances, and you can sort of give a bit of supplementation at that point. But you can test for these things and you can see if that's what's going on. It's like, oh, my magnesium is probably low. Let's test your magnesium. It's not low. Okay, so that's not it. And then, move on from there. But, generally those sorts of things like the cramping, I generally find that you get a bit of that in the beginning and then it sort of normalizes afterwards. And it sounds like you did as well. I even got a bit of cramping for a bit. And then like I went to, the tropics, I was in Bali, and I was just getting outrageous cramps in my calves like every night. And I did the same thing. I put a bit of salt in a thing of water and I just drank it and it would calm down. I could go to sleep. But that happened every night for like 3 days. And then
my son who told me about that now lives in Bali.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you need to know it there. People go, like the Brits and so forth would be traveling through the tropics. You always have these little salt tabs and things like that, put in your water to help with cramping and so forth. And and that's it. I've never had to supplement, and people that, I, work with and so forth, they don't need to either. And they don't seem to get these problems. And so I don't know what Saladino has, I don't know what's going on differently there. But
you know what I think it is. I think it is. I mean, I used to listen to tons of his podcasts, and they're absolutely fascinating how he goes through the science and whatever. I can't take in more than 10% of it. I just sort of listen to stuff and I go, oh, maybe that's why that worked in practice. All I see is things working in practice. Yeah. And it's very, very simple. And to me, it's about, I got one, there's a video on it on my YouTube channel about is eating only meat boring or something. And it's about when you refine your tastes, when it goes from wanting all the time, you want pizza and chips or ice cream, basically, because, that combination of fat and carbs that doesn't happen in nature, that is hyper palatable, and away it goes, you can't stop eating them. But once the tastes have refined, you start to get really interesting things. Like I'll have a day where I'm totally averse to beef, but I really want lamb.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Or I'll have a day, and it doesn't happen so often, where I go, do you know what? We need some oysters, and we'll have a great big oyster binge, and just eat them all raw. And then I'll end up with a really bruised hand, from opening the damn things. And I'm going, right, I'm not doing that again for a while. They're too much hard work for what you get out of them. But something in me tells me I need that. And sometimes I used to eat eggs every day, right? But not anymore. I don't like the whites. I think they're very inflammatory, particularly for people with any autoimmunity. They can be very, very painful. And the yolks can, even in the early stages, but it's great nutrition in there. And every now and again, I just want some yolks. And I have this feeling that I just need a ton of egg yolks over some burgers that I'll grill, that I'll make up from some ground beef or whatever. And then I don't want them for a while. And you get that sort of subtle taste where you've got rid of the mad frenzy for carbs and fat combination, but you just kind of know what type of meat you want. And I've got too much liver in the freezer now, and we just hardly ever get it out. But like once every couple of months, I'll go, yeah, I need some liver, and I'll cook some up, and the first bit is great, and that's fine. And then I kind of leave them in the fridge and just eat a couple of bites like a carnivore biscuit while I'm cooking something else, And then after a couple of days where it's been in there, and I go, I just don't want any more. Anyone want any of this liver? No, we don't want any more. I've had enough, and it ends up, either force yourself or just throw it away. And it's the only meat I ever throw away, because you don't get the wastage that you get on plant foods, do you? You know, but if they've given you too much of a big pack of liver and you cook it all at once, the first little bit is fine. You think, yeah, my body wanted that for that day. But after, it's just the refinement, that sort of subtlety that we've lost in our taste, where we just want something that just blasts us, something with enormous amount of sugar or something else horribly addictive. But yeah, once you've been carnivore for a while, don't you find, people come along and they go, oh, I can't give that up. I could never give that up, or this or that, or whatever it is they're addicted to. And you go, well, you'll see down the line, see what happens. And sort of 30 days, they'll be going, oh, I've got such good results over it that I don't really crave it so much anymore, but I still crave this and that. 90 days in, they're like, yeah, there's 2 or 3 things I could still maybe have sometime, but I'm not bothered because of the amazing results. But the rest of those things, I don't even think about them anymore. It's sort of refined the tastes. And I think that's one of the most magical things about it. It puts you much more in touch with what our taste is supposed to be.
Yeah, I found the same thing. And, to the point that I have, friends that have, since gone carnivore and sort of danced back and forth with it. Their family, a friend of mine in particular, was always very meat based, but ate all the rest of the crap too. And then he tried carnivore for a while and had, was having fantastic results, but the rest of his family weren't really on board with that. And so he sort of slipped off of that. And he likes the odd drink and so forth. And so I think that's a lot of things that sort of pull people off of it as well. As they start drinking, and then they start sort of saying like, well, what else can I do? It's not that big a deal. And it's sort of a slippery slope. But he, I was talking to him one day, and I was saying I was making some ribs. I was smoking some ribs. And he was like, oh yeah, I've got this great recipe. You got this rub, do this and have this sauce and do that. And I'm just getting horrified. I'm getting more and more horrified at this guy. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, stay the hell away from my meat. And because I really enjoy and appreciate just the taste of the meat itself. And so like when I get ribs, I'm like looking forward to the ribs, not the sauce and the seasonings. I don't want that stuff that's going to mask the taste that I want. Literally my mouth is watering right now thinking about that. And, and I just said like, yeah, no, I think I'm going to go without a rub and sauce. And he's like, oh yeah, you're just going to go without flavor. I'm like, buddy, if the only flavor you're getting out of ribs is the sauce and the seasoning, like why the hell are you eating the rib? Just have a mouthful of the sauce if that's all you want. You're obviously cooking pretty poor quality ribs if you have to mask the flavor with all this crap. Just eat the damn meat. And so like I just really enjoy the taste of meat. And like you say, taste is what it's supposed to be. You can get these subtle nuances of what your body wants, and like this tastes better than that, and so you just naturally do it. Nature is natural. You just automatically do it. If you're eating what you're supposed to be eating, you can actually listen to your instincts, which is wild, because normally people say like, no, you have to leave the table hungry. You never eat enough, always be all these sorts of things. Like that doesn't make any sense. And they say like, well, when people like eat in times of abundance, then you store fat so that you can go these, fast and feast sort of things. And like, yeah, that can happen. But, you look historically, and quite a lot of the time people had food, abundance of food, access to food all year round. Early, cavemen and so forth, they were running herds of mammoths over cliffs, and they were just dashing themselves to death at the bottom. They were not, poor on nutrition. They dry this stuff and, probably make, a version of pemmican that the Native Americans did. And they'd have this meat the rest of the damn year. And they probably had a ton of wastage. They probably just had so much that they had nothing to do because they could just run another elephant over the cliff. Big deal. And eat again for the month. So there were these people that had an abundance of food. There was, they looked at different people, and if you measured wealth by the amount of work and time and effort that you have to put in to getting what you need to eat and to live and to maintain life, if you have that as a measure of wealth, they found that Native American tribe on the Columbia River in Washington State, in Eastern Washington, was the wealthiest civilization to have ever lived, because they had these weirs set up, these nets all across the Columbia River, and they would catch these big 90-pound salmon constantly. And so they didn't work. They had nothing to do. They just, every day, they just got up and just pulled out a bunch of fish and ate it. Their entire life was leisure. The entire civilization, their entire life from birth to death was leisure. And they didn't have to work for their food and so forth. It was always provided. And so that's not right. So you didn't necessarily have to just eat all this stuff. So you do have a natural off switch. We have a thing called satiety, and people have experienced it, like, I'm full. And so if that theory was right, that you're just always going to be ravenously hungry so that you can build up a big fat store, so that you can survive days and weeks without food, well, you wouldn't ever stop being hungry, would you? But people are. And when you're eating naturally, you just naturally just go, I don't want to eat anymore. People think about this, can think about this in context of, we see in nature, cows stop eating grass at a certain point. They know when to stop. See all these obese guys. There's a lot of grass in fields, tons of it. I've seen it. And so, they just keep eating grass until they just popped, but they don't. I mean, they're lean and strong animals. Lions, they take down a big, buffalo or even an elephant and so forth. They think that all these animals in the wild, where they're working out all the time and they're exercising all the time, and they're very food deprived. Not male lions. They generally do F all, and they're involved in hunt and so forth, but generally they're around for defense of the pride. But they get first cut of whatever they killed. So they get the lion's share. They generally go for the belly fat, which has, the belly meat that has the most fat. People say, oh, they go for the organs. Do they? There's a lot of fat in the abdomen. There's a lot of fat around the organs and so forth. That's where the most fat is in the abdomen. And so I think that, yes, they eat the organs, but I bet you they're getting a lot of fat with that as well. And that's probably the driving force there. King lion gets to eat before anything else gets to touch that thing. And you'll see in these videos, 20 lions in a circle around. It's just, they can't wait to go in there. Their eyes are just like, oh my God, I just want to get in there. And they're not moving because, daddy's going to mess them up if they get near his plate. And so King Lion could just gorge himself until he puked, but he doesn't. He ends up going to a point and he just goes like, yeah, I'm done. Rest of you kids can come in. And then they do, and they pile into it. Why don't you see fat lions? Why don't you see, big, fat, pudgy male lions? They say, oh, well, they work out so much. They're running around in the wild.
No, nobody brings them any Haagen-Dazs afterwards where you get that extra stomach.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because they're eating what they're supposed to be eating, and their body tells them, yeah, I'm done. I don't need to do this anymore. And people say like, well, it's just because they're in the wild, they're running around all the time, they're exercising all the time. Well, first of all, we know with the Maasai that they did studies in the 80s that these guys looked like they were like Olympic champions. They were just ripped. And yet they only worked out and exercised 1.6 times more than the average American, which in the 80s was very, stagnant lifestyle, really wasn't doing too much. But, you think about it more, more directly. They say, well, these animals in the wild, they're always lean because they're exercising all the time, and exercise is what makes you lean. Like, as obviously you have to exercise and do cardio to get abs, right? It has nothing to do with anything else. It's purely exercise. And that's how you get your fat down. Wrong, because that does not explain animals in the zoo. Animals in the zoo live in a box the size of a small apartment, and they live their entire lives as the definition of a sedentary lifestyle. And yet they don't get fat. They get ripped. They look like they're on steroids. And, unless they're giving them carbs and grains and crap like that, most zoos will not do that. Most zoos give animals what they eat in the wild. And as you can ask any zookeeper that knows what the hell they're doing, if you feed an animal something that it doesn't eat in the wild, something that didn't evolve on, it gets sick. And it gets the same things that we do. It's heart disease, liver disease, diabetes, cancer, obesity, autoimmune disorders, arthritis, and so forth. Same with dogs and cats eating grain and plant-based kibble. And same with us eating grain and plant-based kibble. It's all the same thing. It's all toxicities and poison from species inappropriate diet. And if you eat a species appropriate diet, you will naturally eat less. You will naturally monitor and restrict your calories to what your body's asking you for, and I think, and taste has a lot to do with that. And I think that, like you say, I've been pretty amazed by that as well, that my taste, which is a heretofore ignored sense, one of your 5 main senses, where people are just like, oh, that's for my enjoyment only, no, that thing does a lot of work. And I've really found a new appreciation for that as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, you see all of these people with fat pets and you just know what's going on. They're eating biscuits.
Yeah.
That's it. you know, and the vets say you need to give them some more exercise. I remember seeing one of my neighbors once, and he was sort of dragging this barrel-shaped dog with these tiny little legs that could hardly reach the ground around the park, saying, "Oh, the vets told me it needs more exercise." Okay, come on, he can't even walk. It's not going to get any exercise. The damn thing's so fat. What are you feeding it? And he goes, "Oh, the biscuits. You're feeding it those horrible dog biscuits and all that crap, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yeah. Well, why don't you actually feed it what it's supposed to eat and see what happens?" I never thought of that. He said, "It's weird, man. I mean, we've just got this little cat." And he was sitting on top of the drums packed up there just before we went on, but he's run off and done something else now. But he's just raw meat, and he's just fantastic. I'll be amazed if we ever have to take him to the vet. He's had nothing but raw meat. I mean, we did make a mistake and give him lamb and beef to start with, and he was getting all the runs and stinking the house out. And then I suddenly thought, hold on a minute, why am I being so stupid? This is a cat, right? It doesn't get rabbit starvation. We do. This is an obligate carnivore. We're facultative carnivores. We're mostly like lipivores, really, aren't we? Fativores as humans. But this cat, it doesn't do well with all that fat. So as soon as I put him back on chicken and rabbit and small things, then he's absolutely fine. And turds don't even smell. You don't even know when he's done one. And it's fantastic. But I mean, animals just don't eat. You give that cat a bit of broccoli, it's not going to eat it. We have a corn snake, and you give it something, even a piece of meat, you won't eat it. But it's got to be a whole animal. These creatures are not stupid enough. They'll eat exactly what they want to eat, what they're designed to eat. And we need to get back to that. This is what we do. When we with our work in the Human Unleashed, really, and the red pill stuff, it's just showing how much all of our ancestral stuff has been covered up. That ancestral model doesn't work for everything. It doesn't work if somebody's got anaphylactic shock or something, and you go, right, well, have a bit less screen time. No, you need some steroids there or something. You need to bring that down. But if you've got somebody with all these layers of things wrong, we just don't even know because we've been fooled for so long. And to take all these things away and just give somebody the real appreciation of that, because you don't have to give up. You don't have to go live in a cave. You can give up. You can get your light cycles right by getting out in the morning without first getting on your phone and getting your light, the natural light, wherever it is. Get grounded every now and again. Do a little bit of exercise. Do some high intensity interval training. Do a bit of lift some weights, and then go lie down. Have a big steak. Lie down. Chill out. And some people, I think, well, most people now have got. They're not even. I was thinking about that when you were talking about the guys who just catch the salmon. They don't have to do much, and most people can't even be with themselves anymore. They don't have the ability to just hang out. What I like the most is going out carp fishing, and I'll go for like 24 hours at least, and just sort of midday to midday, and I'm out all night, and I sleep there in a bivvy, and the rods are on bite alarms all night, and if I get a fish, it wakes me up. But I like these difficult lakes where you don't get woken up too much, but when you do, it's a monster and that kind of thing. And just to be able to sort of wake up in the middle of the night and see just natural light and see the stars, see the moon, and just be content with that. And most people aren't. Most kids have never seen that. They're just in a screen all the time. They've never seen them been out at night. They've never walked in the woods at night. And we've become so disconnected from all of these things. And all of these things are so healing, when you add them up. And you don't have to lose all your technology. Just learn how to use it in better ways. If you have your laptop on your lap, don't have it plugged in, don't have it on Wi-Fi so that it's sort of frying your balls, don't do stuff, things like that. Take breaks between it, get the light right, get your stress down. Eat a carnivore diet. And it's very rare where you see something that doesn't unwind. I'm kind of sad at the moment because, as I told you, I'm off down to my best friend's funeral. And he was just, all his life, he was just one of these guys who could do anything, and he was muscular and ripped. He looked amazing, this dude. If you think of sort of a more attractive version of Patrick Swayze, that's kind of what he looked like. He was always very annoying that he'd eat anything and just stay really ripped. But it caught up with him in a different way. And he got this ALS thing and just absolutely wasted away. And I didn't, I remember asking around, asked Zofia at Paleo Medicina, have you ever had any success with this? She said, it's the one thing we've really not had success with. And and Jack Cruz, I talked to him about it, and he said, yeah, probably you could, but you'd have to do everything right for every moment of the day. He said, you'd have to be somewhere completely stress-free, by the sea, in the sun, being grounded all the time, never doing a damn thing wrong, getting exactly the sun you need, exactly the sleep you need, exactly the food you need. And that's very, very difficult to do, to put yourself in that situation. But it was a difficult one to see him, this real powerful muscular dude, end up, really wheelchair bound and sort of stick thin. But he was, and he just knew all about this stuff, he knew all about it, but it was too much for him, but it was too late for his body. But unless you've got something like that, which I think is one of maybe the most horrific things, all sorts of things are manageable. Like I was thinking the other day when my friend Andrew Scarborough sent me something about how he's being hassled at work by all these horrible, mandates and whatever. And he works for the NHS here. But Andrew had glioblastoma, and he did have the operation, and then he's controlled it since with a carnivore diet.
Oh, great.
And he was going, and you should have a chat to him as a neurosurgeon. I think you'd find some great stuff to chat to. He's pretty well known out there. There's a load of interviews with him and whatever. He's pretty young, he's 36. I met him a few years ago when I was at the biohacking summit doing a chat with Jack Cruz with him on the stage.
Send me his information. Yeah, that'd be cool.
I will do. Yeah. But I mean, I think I was thinking about that you'd have a real interesting chat with him. So I believe there's another guy who's reversed it without having the surgery at all. Because you were saying, sometimes it pops up in other hemispheres and whatever. Yeah. Even if you cut it out, and obviously if you don't change your lifestyle, it will do. But I think when people have something like that, they're so terrified. They'd be very terrified to go down the natural route. But Zofia and Chaba, they've got results with brain tumors. They're reversing them, or at least stopping them. On their Paleolithic ketogenic diet, as they call it, the very high fat carnivore diet. And people are sort of making inroads into that. But Andrew's very knowledgeable about all of that, and he'd be great to chat to. He's a good guy. He's got a lot of stuff out there. I'll send you his contacts. I'll hook you up on Facebook or whatever. But I think that pretty much anything, any lifestyle disease, autoimmunity, metabolic stuff, this will nail it. So, if anybody's listened to this, and I'm definitely going to put this one up in my arthritis group. So guys, if you're listening to this here, look, it's not just some daft old drummer here who's saying that. Yeah. Here's a dude who understands about this stuff and has been at it for like 20 years or so. So, I think it would just be lovely when it comes out in the mainstream, but will it? It's just the corporations, isn't it? And yeah, this is what we're trying to uncover in the red pill stuff, the history of how diet's gone wrong and how it's been covered up for religious, spiritual reasons to sort of make people suggestible and weak. And any sort of rulers, you've seen the rulers, and then they feed all their slaves grain, and they're all in there eating all the meat. They know it's fine, and the slaves, they can eat this crap. And this is how it's been done over the happening again. And old Bill Gates, and he's pushing his plant-based crap, and all of these corporations are. And this is how it's happened. And I think at the moment, with all the sort of hoaxes going on, and I won't get your channel pulled down by getting into those subjects now, but it's obvious that we need to make a stand for meat because of all the pandemics and that they're faking, and among the livestock as well. Obviously I would never suggest that our present situation is a hoax. Wash my mouth out. But that's what we're trying to do, and we've got a book coming out called the sequel to the Red Pill Revolution, which was more general of how this has happened, the Red Pill Food Revolution. And honestly, I think it's a beast. It's all five of us contributing to it, and Ben writing it up, Ben Hunt. So it's Graeme Norbury and Dr. Jeremy Ayres, John Gusty, and me. And I think we've really nailed it in this one. It's sometimes something just touches you where, like you get Monty Python, which was great, but then suddenly they did The Life of Brian, which came from God, I think. Yeah. It was just inspired. And I think this is our version of this, where we've just nailed it with this book, and we just keep looking at it going, wow, that is really good. And Ben's really modest, and he just sort of put up privately, so I'll embarrass him here. We said, I think this is the best book I've ever read, let alone written. And I think you're right. I think we just sort of got that right combination of coming at it from all the different angles. And I just love it when I see somebody like you speaking out, because, you know, you with letters after your name and stuff like that, it just inspires people so much, and you bring people in so much more. And brilliant. So, you know, let's carry on.
Absolutely.
Getting this crap blown up, shall we?
Yeah. Well, Phil, hey, I really appreciate you coming on. How can people get in touch with you? How can they find your work?
Oh, thank you. Well, my website is called pureactivity.net, and I'll send you this stuff for the show notes, but philescott.com apparently goes to it. And that's my website with consults and blogs and this and that, all sorts of stuff on there. But my YouTube channel, just under Phil Escott, has a lot of carnivore stuff on it, and autoimmune issues, sort of hopefully with some ideas about those. And I have a course, an online autoimmunity course called the Subtraction Method, that you can find through my sort of Facebook groups and whatever. And then where I met Anthony here, my 100% Carnivore and Beyond group, which is a nice irreverent one. We don't throw people out for posting pics of broccoli. We just might take the piss a bit, you know. Yeah. But it's not strict, and we deal with other stuff beyond carnivory too, other ancestral disconnects. But what I'm really proud about at the moment is this work I'm doing with the other guys, with John Gusty and Ben Hunt and Graeme Norbury and Jeremy Ayres, and it's the redpillrevolution.com, and we have our books there, and we do all sorts of chats that would get my YouTube channel pulled down, and we do discussions on this lunacy that's happening at the moment. But then our sort of sister project, the Human Unleashed, where we have hundreds of hours of videos on God knows what, and loads of all the health stuff, and Q&As every week for members and that kind of thing. And we have a lot of fun on there too. You know, none of this is very serious. Well, we're dealing with very serious issues, but we have a lot of fun between us and get on real well. So, you know, we're going to have to get Andrew on there as well to talk about some of the things that he can't talk about too much in public. And he teased me with some of them last time off air, and I've excited the boys about that as well. So maybe we'll sneak him on there to talk about some naughty stuff. But yeah, so that's where you can find me really. But, you know, put my name in Google or YouTube, it'll probably come up.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on.
It's an honor, man. Thank you so much. I realized just how long we've gone on. Wow. We're almost 2.5 hours. It just flies.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.